dollar. Dirt and money, no soul. Had to go and get it, ain't no time to kick it. Got a stack of flip for my foes. Dollar. Please tell me you can hear me. Don't turn your back and don't neglect me. Just let me know if you need me. Dollar. Let me watch out for my partners. Keep my money long, get my team strong. Let me run away from my problems.
Yo, what's good, original crew? We back, baby. More Mr. Ballen requested video. Hey, we got a couple other requested ones. Y'all keep spamming us up. We'll get to them. Y'all know Fridays we normally do the new ones, so be tuned in. Going forward, if you want to check it out a little earlier, Friday mornings we should post. The latest one will be posted Friday mornings on Facebook. And then if you want the full detailed reaction, it's going to be posted on YouTube normal time. So y'all know. But Friday mornings, our reaction, just pure reaction, will be on Facebook early. Friday mornings. Hopefully. We're trying to get to it. But if you want the full reaction part, like every detail from us, same place always. But the new ones, and then throwback joint was always on Sunday. So, same routine. Y'all know how it is. But keep spamming us up with the old good ones. I thought we had did this one. I checked. I looked. I said, somebody recommended this one. I was like, I swear we had already did this one before. But now I looked. I said, no. And that's the only reason why we haven't did this one. Because I swear I thought we had did it already. And I was like, I guess we ain't. So, we're here. We got top 3 stories that sound fake but are 100% real. Part 11. So, with that being said, man, what the hell?
Lips dry.
Make sure you check out the links in the description box.
Down below.
You already know where to go if you want the first part. All you have to do is check out down below. Also, if you enjoyed today's video,
like it with a thumbs up.
We'll highly appreciate it, man. With that being said, you ready?
I'm ready.
All right, let's go. Let's check it out. Let's see what it's about, man.
Sometimes the truth is stranger than fiction, and today we're going to look at 3 stories that demonstrate that. But before we get into today's stories, if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, then you come to the right channel because that's all we do, and we upload 3 or 4 times every week. So if that's of interest to you, the next time you're in a very crowded parking lot and you see the like button driving around looking for a spot, flag them down and point to your car suggesting you're going to leave, and then go to your car and stand there fumbling for your keys for a few minutes, and then just walk away. Also, please subscribe to our channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of our weekly uploads. All right, let's get into today's stories. In 1918, during World War I, British soldier Henry Tandy found himself stationed inside of a trench in northern France. By this point, Henry was already considered a war hero, and he would go on to become the most decorated British soldier in World War I. But his awards are not what he is remembered for. On September 28th of that year, after a long day of fighting, Henry was propped up on the edge of his trench looking out towards the German line. It was dark and quiet, and there was mist in the air, and at some point, Henry noticed a figure way off in the distance walking towards him. Henry instinctively raised his rifle, but he didn't pull the trigger. He wanted to make sure who he was shooting was his enemy, because it could be one of their own men who got wounded and was making his way back to the trench. And so Henry's looking down his gun, staring at the sky, waiting to figure out who he is, and after a few seconds, out of the mist walks a badly wounded German soldier, so it is his enemy, but he wasn't carrying a weapon, and he didn't appear to understand he was walking directly into Henry's sights. Henry aimed his rifle right at this German man's heart, but he didn't pull the trigger, and the man just continued to walk directly towards Henry until he got about 30 meters away, at which point he stopped and looked up and realized his mistake. But instead of trying to run away, he just stood there and stared at Henry, seeming to accept the fact that he was about to die. Now, Henry had shot many men during the war so far, but he just could not bring himself to shoot this unarmed, wounded German who just looked kind of pathetic. And so with Henry's gun still up, he glanced to his left and he glanced to his right to make sure nobody was watching, none of his comrades were going to see this, and then he lowered his gun. And then Henry and this German man just stared at each other for a while until the German man just nodded his thanks, turned around, and wandered back into the mist out of sight. The man Henry had just saved was Adolf Hitler.
Damn. I need a drink.
Damn. See, if he had killed the motherfucker, he could have. See, What the? You ain't got no more drink.
I ain't got no more drink.
See, that's a. You know, if he had killed him, what he could have possibly prevented.
That's crazy, though.
Bruh.
That's crazy. Okay.
What you would have done? You
Light him up. No, I'm just like.
But
no,
that's
I'm
your
not
job, though.
Yeah, but I can't say what I would have done.
But I'm saying you wanted to be in the military at one point, so if you know what I'm saying, I wanted to at one point too. Even though my morals say I can't do it, and I think that's probably the reason why I kind of backed that up.
But see, I wanted to be on the other side.
Military, no matter what it is, if it comes down to it, you have to.
Yeah, but I'm saying
no matter what branch you are.
That's not what I'm saying.
I'm just saying, if you had, no matter what, if you had to be out there and you had to take the shot, are you taking the shot?
I can't say.
If it's my job, I'm just saying.
I mean, I guess it was the fact that he was like, he's badly wounded, he's not armed. And I guess just his conscience was like, I can't bring myself to do it.
If it's my
and then
job,
and I guess with him being, because when you're doing stuff and they far away, it's easy because you don't see them. But I guess in his head, I don't know.
But he done it several other times. He would have did it to you.
That's not a good question to ask me.
Especially,
I'm not a valid person, so I don't know. And not that none of them are either, but
especially who that was, he would have did it to you. So why?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's my job.
In the early morning hours of June 10th, 1994, Deborah Hoyt suddenly woke up in the middle of the night. She and her husband were staying with relatives in Sacramento, California, and they were supposed to be there for the next couple of days. But as she was sitting there, she had this overwhelming urge to want to leave right then and there and head back to their home in Lake Tahoe. Because she didn't really know what to make of this overwhelming feeling, she shook her husband awake and told him about it. She thought that maybe something was wrong, and he said, you know what, you probably just had a bad dream and you're kind of waking up still half in your dream. It's not a big deal. Just go back to bed. I'm sure everything is totally fine. And in the morning, if you still want to, I'd be happy to leave. And so Deborah said, yeah, you're right. I'm totally overreacting. I'm sure it was just a dream. And she laid back down to try to go back to sleep. But as she laid there, that sense of dread that something was wrong and that she had to leave right now, it was just growing and growing and growing until she just jumped out of the bed and she's just standing in the room and she says to her husband, honey, we gotta go right now. I don't know what's wrong, but we gotta go right now. And her husband did not want to go. And he said, come on, Deborah, get back in bed. It's not a big deal. But she was adamant. She said, get out of bed. We're leaving right now. And so begrudgingly, her husband said, okay, we'll leave right now. And so the two of them hastily packed up and then went downstairs and left a note for their relatives explaining their absence, and then they got in their car and they drove off. After a little while, the couple reached a very dangerous section of their journey back home. It was called Bullion Bend, and it was a very windy road up in the mountains where one wrong turn and you're going flying down the side of a mountain. After driving through this area for about 15 minutes, they rounded a particularly sharp turn, and as soon as they made the turn and could look down the road, Deborah, who was in the passenger seat, she saw up ahead on the right, off the side of the road several feet, something that was just lying there on the side of the road. She didn't know what it was. She thought it was maybe a bag or some trash or maybe a dead animal. And at first she was just going to dismiss it. But as her husband drove closer and closer to it, the light began to illuminate it, and she looked at it and couldn't really discern what it was until they were right next to it. And she looked out her window and she noticed it was a woman's body, a woman who had no clothes on, who was just lying there totally motionless. And Deborah immediately turns to her husband and says, honey, I just saw a dead woman on the side of the road. And her husband immediately is kind of panicked and doesn't slow down. He just keeps driving and says, hey, should we stop? Should we turn around? I mean, maybe she's not dead. Maybe we can help her. But Deborah at this point is now terrified. And she's saying, no, keep going. Don't go back. I bet it's a trap. Someone probably put her there and they're going to lure us in and they're going to attack us if we try to stop and help her. And so in this kind of chaotic, frenzied reaction that Deborah and her husband are having, they decide that their best course of action is just to drive on and find the next payphone and call the police. And it just so happened that less than a quarter of a mile away was a ranger station with a phone. And so they pull into the parking lot and Deborah calls the police. The police tell her to wait inside of her car and they'll be out in a couple of minutes and they're going to need her to bring them up to where she saw this body. So a couple of minutes goes by, the police show up, and they tell them to drive back up the road, but stop about 200 yards short of where you believe this woman's body is. And so Deborah and her husband, they get back in the car, they drive back up the road where they came from, and right at this point where the road turned very sharply is where Deborah knew on the other side of this turn would be this body. And so they pulled over on the side of the road, the police came up on their side, and they said, yep, right around the corner, you're going to find her lying on the ground on the left side. And so Deborah and her husband are just sitting in the car watching as the police go up, they make that turn, and they kind of disappear out of sight, and then they see their spotlight moving around on the other side of this turn, and so they figure, okay, they're looking for the body. But after several minutes, the police came back down the road, and they stopped next to Deborah's car, and they said, you know what, guys? We didn't see anything up there. There wasn't a body. There wasn't anything out of the ordinary. And Deborah would say to police, I'm not lying. I know what I saw. It was a woman's body right there in front of me. I know it. It's right over there. And they would tell her that we believe you, but we can't do anything because there's nothing up there. And so they told Deborah and her husband to just head home, and they did. After Deborah and her husband took off and were gone, the two responding officers drove back to their police station, and once they were inside, they began speculating about what Deborah might have seen. And as they were talking, another officer came into the station, a guy by the name of Rich Strasser, and he overhears them, and he goes over. He's intrigued, and he asked them, what happened? What did you see? And they explained to him that this woman, Deborah, had spotted a supposed dead woman's body up on Bullion Bend. And as soon as he heard Bullion Bend, Rich remembered that just a couple of days ago, they had received a missing person report of a young woman named Christine Skubish and her young son named Nick, who had gone missing, and the last place they had been seen was up on Bullion Bend. And so Rich wondered if maybe there was a body up there, and maybe it was Christine's. And so the next morning, Rich got up early and he headed out to Bullion Bend, and when he reached the exact spot where Deborah had claimed to have seen this dead woman's body, he found a children's shoe. And so he stopped his car, he got out, he picked the shoe up, and he's looking around and he's looking for anything else that's out of the ordinary, but there's nothing on the road, there's no skid marks, there's no other debris, there's no other clothes, there's nothing. And so he walks over to the guardrail that overlooks this very steep embankment, and he looks down the other side, and at first all he sees is just trees everywhere, but as he's looking, he thinks he sees more clothing farther down the mountain. And so he climbs over the guardrail and he very carefully maneuvers his way down. And after only a couple of seconds, he reaches a clearing in the branches and the trees, and he can see down to where the terrain kind of levels off. And right down there is a smashed up red 4-door sedan. It was the same type of car that Christine Skubish had been driving when she went missing. And so Rich ran down the mountain, following debris all the way to this wrecked car. He goes around to the driver's side and he looks inside, and there in the driver's seat is Christine Skubish. And unfortunately, she was deceased. And then on the passenger seat is her son, Nicky, and he is alive, but barely. He had gone 5 days without food or water. And doctors would say when Rich found him, he probably only had about 1, maybe 2 hours before he would have died as well. Authorities believe Christine fell asleep at the wheel and she drove off that embankment. Initially, Rich believed Deborah must have seen Christine when she was driving through the mountains and saw that woman on the side of the road. After her accident, Christine must have gotten out of her car and then climbed up that embankment and then laid on the road, hoping someone would see her. And then when no one stopped for her, she went back down to her car where she ultimately died. But according to the coroner, that would have been impossible because when Christine crashed off the road, she died on impact 5 days before Deborah saw that woman on the side of the road. So it could not have been Christine. To this day, no one knows for sure who or what Deborah saw on the side of the road. But it is objectively true that Rich only investigated Bullion Bend and found Nicky alive because of Deborah's police report about this dead woman on the side of the road. And Deborah was only on that road because she'd had this totally weird middle of the night urge to suddenly leave a relative's house and drive up into the mountains, something she had never felt before and didn't really know how to explain. So either this is an extremely strange set of circumstances, or Nicky had a guardian angel.
What you think?
I have my speculation about this is crazy. So I want to hear what you guys say first.
No, I want to hear what you got to say. I spoke on the last one.
No, you didn't. You didn't speak on the last one at all. I did. So speak.
I don't, what? What you want me to say?
We've spoken on it before.
What you want me to say?
No, I'm just saying, say what you think. That's what I want you to say. Why you afraid to speak on what you think?
I'm not afraid to speak on it.
I ain't
You know,
speak.
people just be thinking you crazy, but I ain't afraid to speak on it. But I think who she did see was Deborah. She didn't know it was.
Deborah is who.
Not Deborah.
Hey,
Christine.
hold on. Let me pause. That is the. Those are the notes I write down.
The names.
I just write like location, names, and dates.
Yeah.
And I like Rich is the officer.
Right.
Deborah is. Those are the notes I write
Christine.
down.
I do think the person that Deborah seen was Christine.
Yeah.
She didn't know it was her because she didn't know the situation. But I do feel
she seemed like an image or a ghostly image of Christine, like Christine's spirit laid out there,
something,
and she was able to see the envisional spirit of Christine.
And honestly, maybe with her dream and her having an urge to leave was whatever leading her to that area, so that she could report it, so that they could find her. Although she probably died on impact, in the midst of it, it helped her son. Yes. Unknowingly, because you didn't know that there was Christine, she had been missing. Because
basically, possibility is Christine's spirit saved her son.
Yeah,
basically. She was dead, deceased already, but she didn't want her son to. So she had to send some type of supernatural
like that,
powers or whatever to get somebody to come and see something, which shows the direct direction of where they went off the embankment at. Yeah. But why is the shoe right there? If they crash, why is the shoe right there? Only thing is the little boy's shoe. Yeah. That's you get what I'm saying? That's the odd part.
I wonder how old he was.
That's the odd part.
That's the only other
because how would his shoe be there if they crashed or did they?
And that's also my thing, because you said that he said there was no skid mark. But I guess if she fell asleep, because then it said she possibly fell asleep at the wheel and crashed, then you wouldn't have even, because you would have been asleep, so you wouldn't even been trying to brake or nothing like that.
But you still would have had some tire movement, though.
Maybe so, or something.
You still should have tire movement.
But where would the car have went over at? Like the police is seeing. I understand it was nighttime when y'all went, but still.
Or is it one of those that, like I told you, like in Gallenberg, you got these high cliffs, but they don't have any railings. Yeah. And that's the reason why I really don't like driving up there.
Maybe so.
Because it has nothing to block off the railing.
If you're going a certain way with curve, you can just go right on over.
Yeah, without running over a guardrail or anything. I hate roads like that. Like, why have such high, steep hills and stuff with no guardrails, Yeah. But I still, with the little boy's shoes still, that's the only bizarre part that will make you think elsewise, or the spirit could have, if you believe in those type of things.
That type of stuff. But,
or somebody could have did something to them as well.
I was thinking, like, at what point did the car start to lose control? And did it just go straight down? Did it? Well, no,
but you would have had skid marks if it started losing control, because you would have had to steal the tire.
Well, with that, I don't really know exactly how it happened, or if it was an accident, or if she did fall asleep and all that. I don't know that part, but I do feel like Deborah probably was put on that road probably
not
for.
Oh, you saw?
Yeah, I do feel like Deborah was put on that road, or having the urge to leave for a reason, because that's just odd in the middle of the night to be like, Again, if you believe in that type of stuff. Yeah. But so that's at the end of the day, although unfortunately Christine passed, it did save her son.
Yeah. That's the best thing. So we kind of on the same page.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
In early 1983, residents of the Cranley Gardens apartment complex in North London began complaining about their drains being clogged up. Initially, their landlord was dismissive and said, "Oh, it's just an old building, it's old plumbing, and that's why it's slow." But eventually, the landlord conceded and asked a plumber to come out and have a look. And so, on the evening of February 8th, an experienced plumber named Mike came out to Cranley Gardens, and after learning what the complaints were, he went around to the side of the building and he opened up a drain cover to have a look inside. As expected, when he shined his light down, he saw wads of hair and napkins and other things kind of mashed together, clogging up the pipes. And so he reached in and he began pulling the stuff out and putting it in a bucket right next to him. And then after he had cleared the majority of the obstruction, he reached his arm all the way into this pipe to feel around to see if there was anything in there that he just couldn't see. And at some point, as he was reaching, when his arm was almost completely into this pipe, his hand hit a major blockage. And so he moved his fingers around to try to feel what it was, but he couldn't tell. It was something that was fairly soft, but there were some hard things inside of it, like sticks or rods. So he grabbed a handful of this blockage and he pulled his arm back out of the pipe. He opened his hand, and what he was holding looked like ground meat, but it wasn't any meat he had ever seen before. And inside of this fleshy substance looked like little bits of bone. Now, Mike had cleared many pipes before, and he had never seen meat be the reason for a blockage. And so this whole situation just seemed really strange, and he decided, it's late, I'll just come back tomorrow with my supervisor so he can see what this is too. So Mike puts the cap back on the drain pipe, and he walks out from behind the building back out towards his truck parked on the road. And as he's walking, two of the residents of this complex come out and they say, "Hey, did you fix the blockage? What was it?" And Mike would say no, he hadn't. And then he just kind of blurted out that there was meat in the pipes. That was what was causing the blockage. And then one of these two residents says, "Well, I bet people are just flushing their Kentucky Fried Chicken down the drains. That's what's causing it." And Mike looked at him and he was like, "Yeah, maybe." And then he just turned around, got in his truck, and he drove away. Early the next morning, Mike and his supervisor came back to Cranley Gardens, and they went around to the side of the building. They undid that cap, and then Mike reached down inside expecting to feel this blockage, but where it should have been, there was nothing. Somebody had cleared the pipes. And so Mike and his supervisor are looking at each other, and Mike is like, "There's no way that cleared on its own. Someone had to have come out here and cleared it, but I don't know why they would have done that and still had us come out." But the men decide, maybe by chance it did just kind of slip through and clear itself, so let's just continue the process and make sure each of the apartment buildings, their individual pipe is unobstructed. And when they checked these pipes, they found all of them were clear except for one, apartment number 23, whose pipe was blocked up with more of this meaty substance. Mike and his partner were already very suspicious of the fact that someone had snuck out here in the middle of the night and cleared the pipe. Probably. They didn't know if that happened, but it seemed likely. And now they're finding more of this weird meat substance coming from a particular apartment. And so the whole situation just seemed off. And so they told the landlord that they were not going to touch this. Somebody else had to come out and deal with this. And the landlord, after finding out there was meat jammed in the pipes, got really freaked out and called the police. The police showed up.
Would you have, if you was a plumber, would you have?
Have what?
Unclog the pipes. That's your job. But with it being like weird, would you?
And with it being so late and me not knowing.
No, I'm talking about the next day.
Oh, the next day.
Him and his supervisor. After checking each apartment, and apartment 23 is the only one that has.
Oh, yeah. I probably would have tried to, but at the same time, it's weird. So it kind of, like, when you get like this feeling like something's a little off with this situation. Intuition. Yeah, it's kind of like, we need to investigate this a little bit more because it's not normal.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So,
This meat substance out of the pipes, and they sent it to a mortuary where a pathologist looked at it and said, "This is meat. It's human meat." And in particular, the stuff that was pulled out of apartment number 23's pipes is that of a human neck. So the police go back to Cranley Gardens, they go up to apartment number 23, they knock on the door, and when the door opens, they're hit with this overwhelming stench of just rotting flesh. And standing in the doorway of this apartment, the owner of the apartment, is this guy who's in his late 30s, early 40s, who introduces himself as Dennis Nilsen. And they say, "Hey, Dennis, can we have a look around your apartment?" And he says, "Why?" And they say, "Well, we found human remains in your pipes." And Dennis immediately says, "Oh my goodness, I can't believe that. That's horrible." But the police are not buying it. And they say, "You know what, Dennis? Tell us where the rest of the body is." And at this, Dennis suddenly went expressionless, emotionless, and he just turns around and he points into his bedroom and he says, "It's in 2 plastic bags in my closet." And so before the police go into his apartment to go inspect these bags, they say, "Dennis, are there any other bodies in your apartment that we should know about?" And Dennis sighs and he looks up to the ceiling and says, "Yeah, there's about 15 or 16 here. It's a long story. It goes way back. I'd love to tell it to you, get this off my chest, and I'll do it at the police station." Wow. So after Dennis was arrested and brought to the station, he told them his horrible story. It had all started 5 years earlier in 1978 when Dennis was 33. He was at a pub having some drinks by himself when a teenager came into the bar and attempted to buy an alcoholic drink, and he was denied service. And so Dennis pulled him aside and said, "Hey, I'd be happy to give you a drink at my apartment. It's right down the road." And the young man, whose name was Stephen, was very excited about this and said, "Great, let's go." Once they arrived back and they were up in Dennis's apartment, the pair had lots of drinks and they were having fun and laughing. And then at some point, the pair climbed into bed together. The next morning, when Dennis got up, his new friend, Stephen, was still sleeping right next to him. And he had this sudden, overwhelming sense of dread because he knew as soon as Stephen woke up, he would see this as a one-night stand and he would just leave. He would not stick around and remain friends with Dennis.
This is crazy as hell.
This is insane.
Because what I want to say is people would be offended by what I want to say, so I'm not going to say it. But this is fucked up. It's crazy. I might save it to the end. I might just say my comments
let me
to
see if it's too much.
No, I might just say this.
He don't have no filter, y'all.
I might say that to the end. But that's fucked up. And this happened in North London in 1983.
1983.
Started 5 years prior.
Yeah.
Dennis just did not like that idea. He wanted Stephen to stay. And so he looked on the ground next to the bed and he saw the necktie that Stephen had been wearing was on the ground. And so he got on the ground, he grabbed the necktie, he fashioned it into a noose, and then he climbed back on the bed, got on top of Stephen's chest, and he looped the tie around his neck, and then he pulled it as tight as he could. And as soon as it was tight, Dennis would tell police that Stephen came alive. And he began reaching for his neck and kicking Dennis as hard as he could, but he just can't get it off. And at some point, Dennis said Stephen just seemed to give up. He looked up at Dennis and knew he wasn't going to get this off and that Dennis was determined to kill him. And so Stephen just allowed himself to go limp, and then he slouched over. And as soon as that happened, Dennis said he relaxed. But as he's looking at Stephen, he realized he wasn't dead. He was just unconscious. And so Dennis goes into the kitchen and he gets this huge plastic bucket and he fills it up with water and he sets it in the middle of his kitchen floor. And then he gets a bunch of kitchen chairs and he lines them up like a table right in front of this bucket of water. And then he drags Stephen's body into the kitchen and he lays him on his back on these chairs, but make sure his head is not resting on the chair. His head is kind of dangling off the back of these chairs. And then he grabbed that bucket of water and he slid it right underneath Stephen's head. And then Dennis got on top of the chairs, on top of Stephen, and then he pressed the young man's face straight down so his head went backwards until his mouth and his nose were under the water. And Dennis held him like that until Stephen regained consciousness, but again, he didn't fight it. He knew he was doomed. And after several minutes, the bubbles stopped coming to the surface and Stephen was dead. Dennis pulled his victim off of the chairs. He brought him into the living room and he sat him on a chair. And then Dennis went into the kitchen and he made himself a cup of coffee and he smoked some cigarettes. And then he just stood in the doorway and looked at Stephen's body. And he would tell police it was a very bizarre experience because Stephen still looked like he was alive. In fact, Dennis would try talking to him as if he was going to talk back, but obviously he didn't. And at some point, Dennis realized, the life he had before he killed Stephen was now over. He had a new life and he didn't really know how to handle it. And so the first thing he thought to do was to clean Stephen. So he took Stephen's body and he brought him into the bathroom and he gave him a very long bath, cleaned his body, cleaned his hair. And then afterwards he got him out, he dressed him and put him into his bed. And then Dennis climbed into bed with him and laid with him. And he would tell police as he laid there, he suddenly felt overjoyed. Stephen was not going to leave him. He was going to stay here as long as Dennis wanted him to. After laying with him for some time, Dennis realized he had to find a way to hide Stephen's body in his apartment so no one could find him. And so he left his apartment and he went to a hardware store where he got an electric knife and a big storage bin. And he brought them back to his apartment, and as he was about to cut Stephen up, he just couldn't go through with it. So instead, he just climbed into bed and took a nap next to Stephen's body. When he got up again, he moved Stephen's body onto the ground in his living room and covered him with a blanket. And then he went and made dinner and then sat in his chair in the living room right next to this body on the ground and watched TV for a while. When he was done watching TV and eating, he looked at the body on the floor and realized, he really hadn't made any progress in terms of hiding him somewhere in his apartment. And that's when he remembered he had a loose floorboard in his apartment. And so he went over to the loose floorboard, he pulled it up and he saw there was a space under the floors. And so he pulled a couple more boards up and then then he grabbed Stephen's body and he attempted to force him down into this space. But by now, Stephen's body had begun to stiffen up from rigor mortis. Specifically, his arms were outstretched like a Y over his head. And so as Dennis is trying to force him down in there, his arms were not allowing him to go down into that small space. So Dennis took Stephen's body and he propped him up against the wall in his bedroom. So the body is against the wall, rigid, standing up with its arms up over its head, and Stephen's eyes were still open. And then after that, Dennis just got in bed and fell asleep. So all night, this corpse is staring at Dennis in his bed. And then the next morning when Dennis got up, there was Stephen still up against the wall with his hands in the air looking down at him. Dennis grabbed Stephen's body and put it on the ground, and he began yanking and jerking and pulling on each of Stephen's arms until they were pinned down by his side. And then after that, Dennis started working on his legs and his hips, and he began contorting him until he was small enough that he could pack him down under his floor. And then once he was under there, he just put the boards on top and went about his daily life. And for the next couple of days, he totally forgot about Stephen. But a week after putting him under the floor, Dennis decided he missed Stephen and he wanted to see him again. And so one night he opened up the floorboards, he looked down, and there was Stephen. And Dennis would say it looked like he was dirty. So he pulled him out of the floor and he gave him another bath. And then after...
This is some sick ass shit.
This is sick as hell.
Bro, I ain't never heard no... Not... shit.
Yeah.
I'm gonna say that to the end. Ooh, I mean,
crazy.
golly, you know, I've never heard. Well, I keep saying I start midway.
I'm like, yeah, you done heard.
I done heard a
This
lot of
is
crazy
crazy.
shit. Like that's fucked up for me to say.
They all just.
No, I'm
crazy
saying
and
what I'm
sick,
thinking about
yeah.
is fucked up for me to say. But I've studied serial killers. I've studied some of them. And I'll say this. Every time I study a serial killer always have looked up to another serial killer.
Yeah.
They get the idea, the motivation from a previous serial killer that they heard about.
Most times, yeah.
Most times, they inspired by somebody else.
Yeah.
That's all I'm saying. Save it to the end.
He cleaned Stephen, he pulled him out of the water, he dried him off, and he put him in the chair. And then Dennis took a bath himself in the same water he had just used to clean Stephen. After a long soak in this tub, Dennis finally got out, he toweled himself off, he redressed Stephen, and then he forced him back onto the floorboards and covered him up again. And he would remain there for the next 7 months until Dennis finally decided to dispose of him by burning him in a bonfire outside of their apartment building. And then after the body was completely incinerated and gone, Dennis remembered thinking, I can't believe I just got away with murder. And so he would do it again and again and again, killing at least 15 young men from North London, all by strangulation or by drowning or a combination of the two. And after he killed them, he would keep them stashed in his apartment for months at a time, in his closet, in his cabinets, in his bed, under the floors, all over his apartment. He had these bodies. And while these bodies were in his apartment, he liked to periodically take them out to spend time with them. He would tell police he found corpses to be beautiful. He was fascinated by them. But eventually, in 1983, he had so many bodies stashed all over his apartment that he knew he really needed to expedite getting rid of them. And so he began cutting them up and trying to force them down his drain, which eventually clogged the pipes. And so when Mike the plumber showed up and discovered this meaty substance in the pipes, and Dennis overheard him talking about it, that night after Mike was gone, Dennis had gone outside and attempted to clear the rest of the remains from the pipes. But he wasn't aware there were still remains stuck in the pipe that led to his specific apartment. Dennis Nilsen confessed to killing 15 young men and attempting to kill at least 7 others, and he was sentenced to life in prison. Dennis never showed any remorse, nor did he show any desire to want to be free again. He actually said he deserved to be in jail for what he did. In 2018, Dennis Nilsen would die in prison at the age of 72. So that's going to do it, guys. If you found the secret in today's video, let us know in the comments what it is and where you found it. So give
Oh my. Let me show you something, cause I don't know if you peeped it, but everybody head is going to the same place, so ain't no point in like hiding what the fuck we thinking. You know what I'm saying? Who do he remind, like image wise? Who do he look like?
Yeah, he looked like him.
Like, let's be real.
And I don't know why I've seen
M.O. the exact fucking same. M.O. that was that fucking same.
Oh.
Let's be real. Like, because I've seen UK people talk about Dahmer, right? Mm-hmm. And they talk about, oh, Dahmer is just this sick ass fuck. Who would have? Y'all got your own Jeffrey Dahmer. Literally. This is y'all's. And it happened before Dahmer. Literally. His started in 1978.
1970.
5 years prior.
Yeah.
1978. So let me do. Hold on. But go ahead. You can. While I'm looking up.
No. Because I'm kind of lost for words. I really have nothing to say. But the entire time, soon he started telling the story, Ballen started telling the story, I was like, why does this sound so familiar? Like, this sounds.
Damn.
What? What's the? Let me see.
They both committed the crime. They first murdered in 1978. Both. And that both first victim name is Stephen. That's the reason why I'm the whole time. I was in my head. I'm like, I was comparing the two the whole
like so when he was
time.
telling the story, that's all. Soon he started telling the story. I said, "This is Jeffrey Dahmer,
but in the UK,
but UK version."
They
and
both committed
sick ass shit.
Dahmer is younger though. Dahmer is younger.
It's
than
younger,
him.
yeah.
But and my thing is, even though Dahmer committed his crime first, they committed
around the
same year.
Yeah.
Is it possible? Because Dahmer stopped. Even though he's committed his first crime when he was a teenager. He stopped
for a while.
He stopped for a while. Is it possible? Because he picked back up in the late 80s. Because that's what I'm trying to...
This is so disturbing. It's everything.
Because this is stuff like, to be real... This is a lot of stuff that I have looked into. I had the dates at one point of each victim's death.
Yeah.
Like
when they had showed the little.
Like I legit had like, all right, he committed this victim and this victim and this victim at this time, this victim at this time. Like literally the month, year, the date, everything, and because in my head I'm like, could it possibly have been reason why he possibly started back up is because he possibly heard about this case. Because he started back right here, it looks like in the late 80s. Mm-hmm. And his next victim name, was his next victim name Stephen? Stephen Hicks. And then another Stephen.
Yeah.
Is it possible, like, let's be real, if this was out in the news, could this have also possibly made him want to start back up?
Start back?
And he's like, he could see himself in this guy. That is information, like, we would never know. Because
honestly, you really don't know, like, if these people are just...
He got caught in 83. Yeah. Dahmer started back in 87, supposedly. Started back in 87. Supposedly started back in 87. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, please. But from just because I don't know why, but every time I hear about serial killer, like I investigate it even more just to see. But other than that, then I weed myself off of it. Because when I was finding out, like I already knew about Dahmer and I know a lot about it, but then we put out the show.
There's two victims named Stephen. The first one was Stephen Hicks, and the other one was Stephen.
I can't say the last name.
Yeah, two of me. I can't say it.
But the second one, the MO was the exact same. They went into a hotel room. That's when he did it in the hotel room. He took the.
That's sad.
But if you notice, a lot of the MO is the exact same. This guy Dennis, he didn't want to basically feel alone. Dahmer always wanted to keep his victims close to him. Mm-hmm. Could he possibly have gotten his MO from this guy? Could he possibly have heard about it?
Because when you have when you see show movies or shows and stuff where they are what is it called? Recreate like with his story or whatever, and then you honestly, they kind of get in the head of the person, trying to see hey, did they study someone? were they following someone? Did they just
he only person he ever like mentioned was John Wayne Gacy.
That's the only person
I've looked into John Wayne Gacy as well, and they have some correlations as well. But also remember, Dahmer was in the military. Yeah. He possibly was studying information overseas, a news article overseas. That's so sad. And is it possible he was influenced by this story to start back up? Because I always say this. A lot of times, serial killers get infatuated by other serial killers. Mm-hmm. Like the woman who, the case I just watched, Business. Yeah. The Business lady. She was obsessed with Jeffrey Dahmer. Yeah. And she said, like, that's kind of how she, you know what I'm saying? I'm like, all right. She just wasn't a serial killer. She became a killer, though. Yeah. So, you never know what is inspiring these people. And a lot of times, news reportings is kind of like keep it. Because I know people want to be aware and knowing. And you want people to be aware. I think sometimes we publicize it and popularize it too much. Where people get inspired by it. Or too much information is being put out. No. You don't think that's what it is? Nah, it's still the popularization of it. Because even the Columbine shootings, they were inspired by people. Yeah. Every time I looked into anything, a lot of those people are inspired by someone else, or a certain event inspired one person from the the Oklahoma City bombings that was inspired by something. All these other like the Unabomber, he was inspired by. Nobody ever does. Even a lot of school shootings, they always refer back to Columbine shootings and the glorifications of it and how they were able to do research. And y'all putting back to what you said, put out so much information, and they fall in love with these people.
But that's what I'm saying. You can report on stuff. But
I think like we over-report
and that's my point.
That's what I'm saying. I'm agreeing with you now.
But I feel like you can report on stuff, but so much information is being put out for people to study and literally
consume. They consuming that shit.
To literally study it and be like, okay, I'm gonna do it this exact same way. I should know from start to finish how something so gruesome, so like.
Because everything he did is damn near the same thing Jeffrey Dahmer did. And Dahmer, you tell, and people think, oh, he's the first person to ever do this. No, this guy, from information we know, to do this Dahmer did it in a whole different light. He did do like some stuff, and it was his own. But a lot of things they did were very similar, the same. They wanted to keep the bodies. They start cutting up the body.
Having it around their
He created as like a meat. Jeffrey Dahmer created as a meat to eat. So he could consume the flesh. Yeah. Because he wanted them to always be a part of him. He would go to even to the point of washing them and bathing them and taking care of the body.
They were beautiful
and that's what he did as well.
That's crazy.
You telling me there's no connection somewhere between these two? Nowhere. They even look the same. Wear the same type of frames.
They do favor.
Hairstyle damn near the same. You can't. You know what I'm saying? You can't. M.O. Sleep with the guy. Then the guy come bring him back to your apartment, and the guy never leaves.
But they don't necessarily like.
Hey, human flesh around the.
This shit's sick. I got you. I'm done with it. It's very sickening.
Shout out to the person. I'm gonna start. I gotta find your name because we get a lot of people to recommend.
We say that every time, but we go definitely.
I'm saying the person that recommended this one recommended the one last week too.
Okay.
So sorry. Let me put some respect on it. Let me find it real fast, and I do apologize. You just recommended it. Damn, the comments been going crazy. I know the profile picture is. And I apologize.
Do you remember, like,
Go to, if you want to narrow search it. go to the most recent Ballen. Oh, Jayla Phillips. This one.
Okay, Jayla Phillips. Sorry, but
Because you recommended the one last week.
Shout out to you, Jayla Phillips, because I'll make sure. Going forward,
back-to-back weeks, we did your recommendation.
Definitely appreciate you. Yeah.
You know, because I would have never known. Now you know me. I'm finna do some research. I'm finna dive deep into this and you're gonna be like weirded out for a couple of days. Then I'm gonna be off of it. You know me. That's just how I'm one of those ones, to be real. Once I find out about this, I have to find everything out. And I'll be like, damn. I'll just be researching. I'll be bringing it back to you. Be like, see, this is what I found out. I found this out.
It's crazy because there's so many people that you don't even know about that were like doing weird, sick.
And it's crazy how... Like this. But I'll say this. The only ones we hear about, and they constantly keep pushing nationwide, is the stuff that happens in the U.S.
Yeah.
And we very seldom hear
like
things
other
states.
Yeah.
And I guess it's lack of our news.
Not states.
I'm saying outside the states.
Oh, outside the states.
Yeah.
Oh.
I mean, outside the states and other countries.
Yeah.
But I guess it's just lack of our news reporting on those things that happen over there. But they report ours, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I don't know. But, man, I got to do some research on this dude.
He look like somebody else to me, but I'll tell you what we get.
He looked like one of them killers, though.
He looked like, but let's move on. Yeah.
And my only thing is, I wonder, is he one of the ones that came to Mike asking him about this? Did you find out? Because you remember it said but we never found out who those dudes were. So. Yeah. Spam us up in the comments. Y'all let us know y'all thoughts about it in the comment section down below, man. But as always, I do go by the name DJ Kid. This is. We are.
Had to go and get it. Ain't no time to kick it. Got a stack of flip for my folks. Dollar. Please tell me you can hear me. Don't turn your back and don't neglect me. Just let me know if you need me. Dollar. Let me watch out for my partners.